Hi there, I'm your host McAuley Tucker, and you're listening to The McAuley Tucker Show, the podcast where I sit down with some of the most accomplished and fascinating individuals in the entertainment and business industry. From celebrities to industry leaders, our guests offer unique perspectives and inspiring stories that will educate and inform you. Join me as I sit down with my next guest to cover their humble beginnings, challenges they faced, as well as their accomplishments in life. You are bound to learn something new, so sit back and enjoy the interview. Today on the McAuley Tucker Show, we had the honor of interviewing Gerardo. Gerardo has been in tons of TV shows, movies, and other projects, but just recently he appeared in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy 3. He's also starred in two other of James Gunn's projects, including Suicide Squad. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. And I was very curious, also being bilingual, how has this cultural background shaped your approach to acting and also the roles that you've pursued? I know, speaking with people, and even myself included, the way that we're raised in our upbringing often impacts our careers and our choices. So I was really curious to hear how your background has impacted your work.
Well, when I first started, by the way, I didn't start acting until I was 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of happened by accident. I wasn't trying to be an actor. It was presented to me, and as most things in my life, I'm a risk taker. I like to try things. I think by trying things, it makes your life more interesting. And you have more fun because you never know when you try something whether you're going to like it or not. Instead of just saying, no, that's not for me, just try it and you never know, right? And so acting turned out to be a 20-year career for me and counting because I tried it. So initially, when I jumped right into acting, I was booking most of my commercials in Spanish,
Okay.
having, being fluent in English and Spanish. Primarily, those were the commercials and the work that I was booking. Even our first TV show, a novela that was from Mexico, filming here in Dallas 20 years ago. I booked that. That was also in Spanish. So everything I was getting was in Spanish, even though I really consider English to be my first language just because I grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously having a great mentor who kept suggesting and encouraging me that, hey, listen, dominate the English language and you'll book more work as a spokesperson in here in America. It was really, clicking at first, but what he meant was if you can be a spokesperson, you can book more work and you'll be working more than anyone else. And boy, was he right. Because once I really started to understand the English language, how to communicate with people, just like the way a journalist does in asking the right questions and getting the right information and doing his research and background and everything. Wow, then I started booking all the spoke stuff. Then I was just always working. So that's kind of how the language and everything translates from my background into my work.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, and it sounds like your beginning stages of your career were very fascinating. Yes, you did mention that you started pursuing acting professionally in your 20s. I do believe you starred in a play when you were quite young, I believe. Is that correct?
I mean, I was what 10 years old, and I was
Yeah.
in a in elementary school, and here's the funny thing: I played the dad in Paddington, and when you fast forward from 10 years old to 29 years old, almost every commercial I've ever been, I'm playing somebody's dad. A lot of, in a lot of things, I'm being the dad. I guess that's just part of my essence, and I am a dad. I have two
Mhm.
wonderful daughters. And so that just kind of comes off naturally. I had four other siblings, so I'm the oldest of five. So again, almost like that dad role, taking care of someone. So, I embrace it. It's wonderful. And so that was my acting, but I didn't, honestly, it didn't click then.
Yeah.
Nobody was encouraging me. No one was pushing me to join theater or be an actor. That was far from that. If anything, my parents being from Mexico, were always saying, just finish school, get an education, and get a job. That
Hmm.
was kind of the thing. And in middle school, I joined the band. I played the French
Yeah.
horn for 10 years. My dad wasn't too fond of it. He was more like, no, he needs to work. What's the French horn gonna do for him in life? But my mom was the opposite. She was like, let him. It'll keep him busy, and I'm sure it'll be good for him. And who knew that music is actually the arts are very important in anyone's life. And something that I encourage is the arts. And so, yeah, that was part that shaped me as well throughout my life. And then obviously has something to do with the acting because it's still in the arts.
course.
Also, as a teenager, I was a performer, a
Yes.
rapper,
Latin
and so
Royal Latin Royalty, I believe that's the group. That was what it was called.
that was our group, and so we would write a song, choreograph a dance routine, and perform it every weekend, every week. And and we just keep doing that all over the city of Dallas. We'd go to events, anybody that would have us, we were there. And so that, I mean, come on, as a teenager to be able to perform and then you get to sign autographs, even though you're just a local celebrity, kind of. That was fun. As a teenager, I think any kid would love that if you're a performer, And so that kind of started building on. And so now, don't ask me about stage fright. I didn't know what that was because I got over that pretty quickly. Then, all in my 20s after high school and throughout college, it was kind of just I was doing a lot of soul searching. So
Yeah.
that's why when acting happened and I ran with it. And I mean, I chose it and it chose me. And, it was a nice combo.
For sure. And I really appreciate you diving deep into how the arts and pursuing the arts impacted your life. I love the arts. I enjoy doing these interviews. I love movies. I've got records over there. You highlighted music as well. You briefly talked about that too. You were part of a group, but then you went and were your own artist, Master G, I believe that was your musical name. And you mentioned there as well, very briefly, that you were soul searching. You were looking for kind of what stuck. And I believe you have mentioned in conversations before that you had tried a lot of different careers. And I was very like during that our jobs during that time. And I was really curious, how did those restless 20s prepare you, I guess, for the acting demands in your future?
So acting is not just, going out there, booking the role and performing and yes, being the artist, right? The consummate artist. There's also a business side.
Mhm.
And those two things go hand in hand. And you got to take care of both sides because if you're not able to pay your bills, you might not be acting for very long, especially if you're trying to do acting as a full-time job. Now, how did that work out for me? In my 20s, I've had a lot of jobs, so many different jobs. I've worked in corporate, I've worked for banks, I've worked for fast food, I've worked in construction, I've worked in warehouse, I've worked in sales. I pretty much was trying every single thing, trying to figure out, like again, soul searching, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. But I did learn a lot of things throughout those 20s,
Mhm.
reading contracts, accounting, bookkeeping. I did a lot of that too. And so I paid attention. I'm always listening. I may not be very vocal at first. If I'm quiet, it's because I'm listening and I'm learning. And so when I started acting and hit the ground running, obviously the first thing you do when you get to set is they're going to hand you a release and a contract, right? And you got to understand what you're signing. There's one particular word that I always tell actors, look for that word. It's called in perpetuity. And that means forever. And if that word is in your release or in your contract, that means they can use that forever and they don't have to pay you again after that day. So learning to look for things like that, right? And obviously making sure that, hey, okay, I'm getting paid today, and this is for 1 year, only to be shown in Dallas or regional, or maybe it's national. And this is what I'll get paid. And if it gets renewed, I'll get this additional paycheck. And what's in there? What are these legal terms? Okay, you know what? I'm not understanding this. Send that over to the agent real quick because they're well versed in seeing contracts at the time, early in my career, more than I am. If they approve it, they're like, this looks great, sign it, great. If not, we'll take care of it with the producers, get to work. And so obviously they can't show it until that release is signed because they don't have permission from me that we agreed to the terms of the contract. Um, yes, all that business part that I was learning. I even ran a gym where I had no experience running in any kind of management position, right? This is before I was acting. I went and they were looking for an operations manager for a Gold's Gym. And I said, I'll do it, but I don't have any experience. He's like, well, I can only pay you $10 an hour. And for a manager, that seems pretty low, right? That's not even entry level coming out of college. So, but I said, you know what? Yeah, but I'm a hard worker and I learn fast. So that's where I learned employee management, operations of a facility, maintenance, dealing with salespeople, reading their contracts. Did they dot every I, cross every T? And so I was taking all this in, working 70 hours a week, you know? And so one gym I went to corporate and worked, and I was over 5 gyms. And so I understood the business and I'm like, wow, this is not a one-man show. This is this is a multiple, a person company. And now I know how that works. But now, fast forward to acting, it is a one-man show, but all that experience, all that knowledge, and paying attention and listening and learning about these things. Every time I read a contract, there you go. So
Mhm.
that translated to that, and that translated to me being successful and working more because I paid attention, and obviously making sure I get my residual money when things get renewed and everything, which is important because everybody wants that
Yeah.
extra little thing.
Wow, that's a really amazing. I really appreciate you breaking that down. What you mentioned there with your experiences and your careers really resonated with me. I find myself in that situation. For speaking from my experience, I really enjoy sales. I have a sales job right now. I sell phones for a phone company. I do believe you even had experience working for a telecommunication company as well. So I'm learning there, fast food as well. I worked over the counter at a pharmacy. I don't like pharmaceuticals, but I worked there once. I do this on the side too. And it does feel the restless 20s can be a little bit weird and uncertain, but you learn from them. You just spoke about that and how your restless 20s impacted, of course, your acting career. And I really like that. I really like hearing that. You didn't just learn from your jobs, you also learned from specifically your training as an actor later on. I believe you were in Class Act Dallas, and that built your foundation. But then you went to Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and that took it to another level. And I was really curious to ask you, there's probably a lot of stories you can share, but what's one unexpected lesson from that program that transformed how you see yourself as an actor, and how did it show up in the roles that you've played?
So Class Act Dallas was a weekly acting workshop where we were challenged with a lot of improv. We did a lot of scene study as far as TV and film and commercials and industrials, which are, if anybody doesn't know, industrials are corporate training videos. Again, going back to that spokesman person's work. One other thing that my mentor, my late mentor, Daniel Foster, would always bring to class was he would make us do plays and sonnets.
Mm.
And so, you're coming in as an actor and you're like, what are we doing today? We're doing a sonnet. We're doing a sonnet. Why aren't we doing the Law and Order? Why aren't we doing, Burn Notice or a CSI? And it's like, because you need to work for the master playwrights. You need to do the good stuff. This is what classically trained actors do in drama school. And so it was my drama school. I was in this class every week for 16 years. And so some people say, well, why are you always in class? Why would you go to class that long? Well, it was a weekly acting workshop because you're constantly growing your craft. And so I was in a unique situation where, because I had an agent and I was going out on auditions, I would bring those auditions to class. We'd workshop that audition. And then I'd figure out some things like, oh, you know what? I'm going to try this out in this audition this week. I had multiple auditions. So I was always trying what I was learning from watching others in class in my auditions. So hand in hand audition, hands-on training, audition, hands-on training, book. And so my resume was growing exponentially. Now, when I went to RADA in London, it was another level. I see the way they approached acting, and it wasn't approached as a business. It was more approached as an artist, as the art, as the foundation of it. That was the first course I took there. It was called European Greats, Chekhov and Ibsen. And honestly, I had not read any of Ibsen's work, and I ended up doing a part of a play from that there. The second time I went back again, here's something that really translated to acting. It was a voice technique course that they offered first time. And instead of just having the guy for like a couple of hours a day, I had him all day for a week. And that transformation there, what I learned there from this class and this organization, this school, when I came back, my voice had more confidence. It was, you grew if you really, really took it to heart. I grew, and now I'm doing voiceover for anime. And I was like, what happened? Like, I couldn't book a voiceover job to save my life. I mean, throughout my career, it was very rare that I was doing any voiceover, even though sound guys on set would always say, hey, we love your voice, man. You should be doing voiceover. And I'm like, well, tell somebody. But yeah, now I'm doing voiceover for anime voiceover dubbing, like at Crunchyroll and video games, that pop up. I get to do that now, and I think it's wonderful. It's fun. It's a different exercise mentally and vocally. It's not like acting for the camera,
Yeah.
although it might feel it, but it's different, and it's something I'm learning and growing with, and I embrace it too as well.
Voice acting, you do have an amazing voice. Speaking to you, I can hear you playing a lot of different characters. I don't know if you've ever explored this. This is sidetracking from our conversation, but I think it'd be very interesting to see you play a villain. I haven't looked over completely your entire catalog, but have you ever considered that? You have this way of speaking. I think you'd play very well a villain. Even a mafia boss, something along those lines. That would be really interesting, and testing that out. There's a lot of actors out there that go far beyond to play these villain roles. I think it'd be really cool to see you play a really interesting villain role with a lot of different twists and turns. And it's really cool going back to what you said, hearing you highlight your education. Looking back at all our lives, education is very important, and that's one of the major focuses of the show, is to just speak about people's lives. And I learned so much, and my listeners learn so much from these types of conversations. And of course, your education, of course, impacted your career. It led to you landing a lot of different roles. The one thing I found interesting about you is, of course, your work with the wonderful director, James Gunn. You've been in a lot of his different projects. And that was the one thing that made you stand out among a lot of my guests, is you frequently appeared in his films. And so I had a really interesting question. This is kind of an interesting one, maybe a hard one. What do you think he saw in you, and and how did that trust shape your confidence on these larger sets?
So the first film I worked with him on was a film titled Super, which starred Rainn Wilson from The Office, and that was a independent film that he was doing. I wouldn't say independent, but it was. I think his trajectory was getting going right then at that moment, because he had already done some other things, but I think he was already getting established. And so when I worked with him on that, I had a small part in well, there are no small parts, right? So I could say it was a short part, I would say. So it was quick. I was playing a police officer chasing a perp, and Rainn Wilson, helps me find him. Like, he's in there, and whatever it was. And so that's when I first met James Gunn. He introduced himself, and I think what he liked about me, I'm not gonna be wrong, but I
Yeah.
think it was the one of the things he looks for is obviously directability, taking direction from a director, like, quickly, because you know daylight is only so much daylight, and we're shooting it, and you got the time, the clock doesn't stop, and that sun's going down, and you got to get these shots in quickly as possible, especially on a limited budget. Obviously, when you're working on a bigger film, and you're indoor in the stage, that doesn't matter. We can go all night long. So that when that happened, it was a short experience, but a great experience. He was wonderful. And then now fast forward 12 years from that, and I have this audition, and it was for the Suicide Squad. I didn't know it was a Suicide Squad because they always use different names
Yeah.
for the films to keep them, top secret. And so it was called El Dorado, and I really thought I was going to be in a movie about the city of gold, which I was really excited about, because I love, like, Indiana Jones, those kind of movies, The Mummy, anything like sci-fi fantasy. I love that kind of stuff. And so um, turns out that he said he saw my audition and that I was perfect for it. And he said that he remembered me, obviously, from Super. And I'm like, wow, 12 years ago, you remembered me? Like, it was did I make that big of an impact in in such a short period of time? So obviously, when we get to set on Suicide Squad, we were walking up on the first day of my shooting, and he sees the other two major stars that are in the film, were alongside me in the scene, and he gives them these huge hugs, and he's like, "Hey, Mexico," and the other guy from Spain, and he gives him a hug. And then when I thought, "Oh, it's just Gerardo from Garland, what's he gonna say?" But he grabs me, he shakes me, gives me a hug, and he's like, "Gerardo," and I was like, "Wow, what a welcome!" He turns around and he announces me to the room. "Everybody, this is the only actor on the Suicide Squad that worked with me on Super." And so eyes, ears popped up, eyes got big, like, "You were on Super?" Like, that's one of his, like, earlier, that's when he was getting, and I was like, "Yeah, I worked on Super." And so we had that connection there.
Hmm.
And so he's so easy to work with. He's such a nice guy, just a sweet guy. He's an animal lover. He loves cats and dogs. And he's just a great guy to be around, a great guy to work with. Um, he takes input well. He doesn't like, no, no, that's not what I want, but he'll listen to you, you know. And so then after we finish the Suicide Squad, you know, and that's you know, getting released and all that's going on. And then I get a call like 6 months to a year later. It wasn't from him or anyone. It was, you know, from casting. Hey, they want to check Gerardo's availability for this time frame. And I'm like, yeah, great. It's for a feature film. Can't tell you what it is. Great. So then, hey, you're booked. You're flying out to Atlanta again. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, it's a film called Hot Christmas. And I'm like, Hot Christmas? I was like, is this one of those, you know, corny Christmas movies, you know, low budget? I don't know. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And I don't have no clue what I'm doing. And then obviously quickly realized that it was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, I'm a huge fan of this, you know, these two movies. I like, again, I love sci-fi fantasy. I'm in love with these movies. How does Gerardo fit in this world? You know, because this is the trilogy, and they're bringing closure to it. What am I doing in this? And obviously, again, having that connection and that relationship with James Gunn, if he likes you, he'll write you into the film and he'll figure out a place for you. And I really appreciated that. It was like a bonus, you know, it was a cherry on top, the icing on the cake. And that goes without saying. In any job I've ever had, a lot of jobs where I'm a repeat hire, it was either they recognize the preparation, how you behave professionally on set, your set etiquette, and likability on set. People want to work with people they like. You know, they don't want troublemakers, they don't want divas, they don't want, you know, those people that just refuse to do what they're not being told what to do, but like that want to collaborate. And so I think a lot of that had to do with me and James Gunn. And so, hey, thank you. I appreciate it. You can bring me back for any movie you ever want to do.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned one thing earlier. You said you were shocked that he remembered you from that short, that short thing. And when you said that, that reminded me of, just characters in general. Sometimes when you're watching movies, there's a character that just shows up for a small period of time, but leaves a lasting impact. And much like this situation, you were there, you were working, and you left a lasting impact, much like the characters that many Hollywood actors play. But in this case, it wasn't a character, it was you, yourself, not playing anybody else but you yourself. And it's really amazing to hear that. You also in past conversations spoke about Suicide Squad. There was people there from Mexico that needed help to have translation, and you even offered yourself up in that situation, which shows a lot of kindness. Besides acting on these sets, can you share just kind of like some of the things that you would do to help, or some things that were fun or maybe interesting?
Oh yeah, a great story for you. I was in LA in 2015, and I had I befriend actors on Facebook, anywhere on social media. And while I was there, one of the actors I befriended on Facebook had put a post up that said, "Hey, we're looking for a script supervisor. If anybody knows one, unfortunately, we don't have a budget to pay them, but we will feed you all weekend." And so I was like, "Hey, I'll look out for anybody I can. But if you can't find anyone, I'm available all weekend. I can help you in any capacity. You said you can't pay me. That's okay. I'm not doing anything this weekend, but since you'll feed me, I'll take that as payment." Well, very quickly, I don't think they had anybody stepping up to the plate that wanted to be a script supervisor. And I remember, I'm always in front of the camera. I don't have behind the scenes experience. So they said, "Hey, we'll take you." And I was like, well, it's a short film. How difficult could this be? So the night before I went for day one, it was a 2-day thing. So it was Saturday, Sunday. So on Friday night, I get on Google and I'm like, what does a professional script supervisor do? What are their duties and what does their work look like? And so I went and looked how they take notes, which is very interesting. They'll take a script and it's printed on the front page. On the back page is like a graph, like a diagram, almost like accounting, right? And so it's got these little spaces. And what it is that you work really closely with a director. And this is just me from what I gathered and my information, my experience. You're listening, you're kind of checking on continuity, and you're listening to the director. And if you hear, "Hey, I like that take," you write that down. "Hey, on this particular take, he liked it." And I'm looking at the camera guy and the slate guy. I'm going, what take was that? What scene was that? Where did it start? I'm taking all this information. So I was literally constantly working from the minute I stepped on set until we walked off set. I didn't stop. Wow. Not working, not paying attention to anything. I was listening, even during lunch, just listening to the conversations. What are they liking? What troubles arising or anything? So yeah, they write squiggly lines. They draw a straight line, a squiggly line. Everything means something. And so I
Wow.
learned all the night before. And so when I get to set, and so I had a 10-page script that I handed to the director when we finished set. Now, one thing that did happen on set was I remember they said, "Hey, that actor which is one of the lead actors in the short film. Keep an eye on him. He likes to improvise a lot, and we need him to stick to the script." So I was like, "Got it. I got experience with knowing people that do that." So, sure enough, yeah, he kept dropping something in the scene that was literally a trigger word later on in the film, and it was just basically every time he saw his daughter, which at the time was in the beginning of the film, was say 4 or 5 years old, he would call her baby girl. And so he wasn't saying that. And what happened later is that she's grown up fast forward. Now she's 20 something years old. Her uncle, while she's working in a diner, says, "Hey, baby girl, bring me a refill." And she hears that and she drops her glass and it crashes. And so that was a trigger word. And so I just caught on to that. And so I'm paying attention. I felt like I was the director, right? Like, hey. So I obviously approached him and said, "Hey, I think he should be saying this because, it's important later in the film." And he was like, "You're right. He does need to say that." And so he corrected him and said, "Hey, make sure you say baby girl when you talk to her." And I was like, "Okay, cool." That felt pretty cool that I was like able to pick up on some things pretty quickly while I'm trying to be a script supervisor, trying to figure out all these other, duties. And so when I handed him the 10 pages with all these notes at the end of the shoot, he kind of looked at me like I was crazy. Like I said, "Hey man, here are all my notes." And he was like looking at me like, "Why do I need your notes? I'm the director. They're all here, right?" And I'm like, "Okay, I just did a little extra something for you." So I gave it to him. I don't know what he did with them, but let me tell you this, weeks or months later, I get a text from the lead actress that asked me to be the script supervisor. And she said, "Hey, Gerardo, you wouldn't happen to have taken any notes on set, would you?" And I was like, "As a matter of fact, I did." She was like, "Yeah, because the director, lost them." I'm like, and I was thinking, did he lose them or throw them away? I said,
Oh,
well, guess what? I took pictures of them. So let me send you the pictures, and of course, forwarded them. They finished the film, and it was entered in many film festivals, and apparently did well. And so that was on my part. I was like, see, I was a professional. I learned something, and I appreciate a script supervisor's job. So when I hear them on set yelling, "You keep saying this, it's this," and I'm like, "Thank you. I appreciate that," because maybe for some reason I'm saying something else. My mind is not processing the dialogue or whatever. I don't know. And so that was something that was pretty cool learning, and be able to share with acting aside from being an actor.
wow, that's amazing. Goodness gracious, I wasn't expecting anything like that. That is really cool. The fact that you can take something that you don't really know like this and study and learn it and then put it into action and actually enjoy it. It's so important to be able to have different skills. Like even going back to our earlier question talking about your previous work, being able to try new things and experience different things is really really beneficial and clearly doing that even outside of acting like you've explained here so beneficial. I know you've talked about preparation as an actor and how it's really key to be prepared. And you've talked about, Cobra Kai and mastering your lines there. What's your secret? I mean, there's a lot of different tips and tricks that we have, whether it be as an actor or different careers, but what's your secret to turning pressure into performance? And how can someone apply that outside of acting?
Turning pressure into performance. So Cobra Kai is a good example. One, the role I got was the announcer at an MMA fight in Mexico, and that was where the scene was taking place. But I didn't know I was going to do that role. I was auditioning for someone's dad in Spanish, and then when I got the role, they're like, "Yeah, you're going to be an announcer." I'm like, "Announcer announcing what?" Like I didn't read for that, and so obviously they're like, "Oh, you're going to be announcing a MMA fight," and so then I'm like, "Oh." Well, I better do my research. What does this announcer sound like? I've never heard a MMA fight in Spanish. I've seen them in English. Obviously, I watch UFC from time to time. So I was like, okay. So I did my research, and it turns out it sounded a lot like a Spanish soccer match. And so at least that was the energy. And I'm like, oh, great. Okay, so I'll just make it my own, but with that energy. And so, okay, so then I did that. I prepared, and I'm ready to go on set. And so I'm watching, we're sitting there, I'm watching William Zabka, who plays Johnny in Cobra Kai, doing a fight scene with an actual UFC fighter, but in the movie, in the show, he's an MMA fighter. But so it was like they were doing their fighting sequence over there, and I'm just sitting there watching because the camera was not on me at all. It was just them. They were getting all these different angles and had to get their scene, and that took all afternoon, all the way through lunch. And so I was like, yeah, that was pretty cool just to get to be there and watch that happen. And then after lunch, we come back and the director approaches me and says, "Hey, Gerardo, I hate to tell you this, but we let everyone go because they've already shot their scenes. And it's lunch, and so it's just going to be you by yourself."
Wow.
And I'm like, wait, so I'm announcing the fight, but there's no fight? And so I was like, yeah, that's what we actors do. We imagine scenarios. Sometimes you might be acting to a tennis ball or a green screen or a PA who's just standing there reading their lines to you up because the actors are not there for some reason. And so I was like, that's okay. I'm prepared. I already saw the scene. I know how it goes down. And so yeah, if you watch the episode, you'll see me in the kind of mostly close-ups, reacting to oh, ooh, and this and that. But there was nothing there. It was an empty room. But with obviously the magic of movie making, and so the editing, and so it looks like it happened while the scene was happening. And so that pressure to me wasn't a lot of pressure because I've been in pressure situations. Maybe the biggest pressure situation was working on a corporate video where I had 30, it was teleprompter, but it was 30 pages of dialogue for a plumbing company. And then while I get to set there, I hear the client say, "Hey, has he seen the Spanish script?" And I was like, "What Spanish script? No one told me I'm doing this in Spanish." And so the director was like, "Oh, Gerardo's a pro. He's got it." And I'm like, "Whoa, first of all, I made a call to my agent. We need to renegotiate this pay because now they want this in two languages." She couldn't get me a pay. So I literally had the right to walk off and say, "I'm not doing that." Or, you know what? I have amnesia. I don't speak Spanish today, you know? But you know what? I rose to the challenge and I said, you know what? Could I pull this off? Because these are plumbing terms in Spanish that I've never spoken or heard of in my life. Could I pull this off? 30 pages of it. And I thought, if you could do this, you could do anything. Seriously. And so I did. I pulled it off. There were some tricky words in there, but I did it. And I did. So I did the English version. I did the Spanish version, mind you, for a lesser check. And so that didn't matter at the moment. For me, it was like, this is for me. I'm going to do this for me today. I don't care. Y'all are lucky today. And did it, pulled it off. So yeah, being in pressure situations like that, I knew that I could handle that as an actor, and you could throw anything my way, and I'm not afraid of it. So I'll just do it.
Wow, that's amazing. And I feel the pain when it comes to the last scenario that you just mentioned with that commercial. Being able to do that without any experience or practice is crazy. And you mentioned going back to Cobra Kai. That must have been very interesting. As you mentioned, actors, you have to pretend and play along. And so doing that without actually visually seeing it must have been very, very challenging. But again, you're not afraid of challenges. You've gone through a lot. Kind of going back to Guardians of the Galaxy, that's a very interesting film. That required a lot of makeup. I know you've shared photos about that before. With that role, I do believe that might have been one of your first physical transformation kind of roles. Maybe there might have been a couple other ones. But what did that teach you as an actor getting into your role as a character? I guess the emotional layers and so on and so forth. Again, I don't know your process when it comes to getting into a role. I spoke to one actor who actually journals himself in journals as the character before he plays. But how did getting into this role, much like the movie magic that you talked about, what did you learn from that, and how did that test you and help you learn as well?
So one of the things, obviously, over my 16-year acting class at Dallas journey in that class was learning to buy into the moment quickly as possible. Like, somebody gives me a script and they're like, "All right, sorry, hey, here's your audition." This is back when we were doing live auditions. And so we did a lot of cold reading. You'd be in an audition and you go in for a role and you're like, "Hey, you're cop one." And you're like, "All right, cool." And so you have a few lines and then they're like, "Cool. Hey, they really like you as the lawyer. Here's the script. Take 10 minutes and we'll see you back right in the room again." And I'm like, whoa, I haven't had any time to prepare this, right? They don't care. This is how fast casting process moves. So you take it, you got 10 minutes, you're looking it over. Now I got to buy into the moment. Now I'm a lawyer. Remember, I came in there prepared as a police officer. So I get my mindset out of that. I'm no longer arresting somebody or questioning somebody. Now I'm a lawyer. Maybe I'm litigating a case in court or working on a case with the client. So it's different. There's a different dynamic there. but being able to buy into the moment, buy into the reality of this new character as quickly as possible, but also it's got to be believable. And so some people I've noticed there are a lot of actors, maybe because of their experience level, can't do that. It's very difficult for them to buy into that. They're just saying lines. They're just like, sir, would you sign the contract? Or it's just whatever. And it's just not coming out for some reason. Well, also, I think life experience, I think also had something to do with me and my ability to get into character faster or just to buy into the moment because I've worked in a lot of offices. I've worked in lawyers' offices. I've worked in corporate offices. I've worked in business offices, mortgage offices. I've worked in, as a business owner, a manager. I've been in the business world that when it comes to these roles, it's like, oh, I've been around these people. I got an idea of someone who I observed, and I'm going to bring that and somehow make it my own, but I know that world. And so I think that matters instead of just trying to be, today, here's my tie. I'm a lawyer. Well, okay. But you know what? I've been around lawyers. I've been around them. And so I know how they behave, how they can behave and how they can be. They do have a different way of being, living and working amongst each other and talking to each other as opposed to, a teacher, or a principal or a fireman or a police officer. And so those things, that I think that had a lot to do with that. So the Guardians of the Galaxy. So that was my first time. Well, sort of first time, but yeah, actually first time doing prosthetic makeup, and that took 2.5 hours. Obviously, getting on. That was similar to the very first film I ever did 20 years ago. I was in a werewolf movie where I had to do a head cast for about an hour where you're just breathing through a straw. And so they're like, hey, are you claustrophobic? I'm like, I don't think so, but let's just do this. You got this head cast. And so you just breathe through a straw for an hour. And maybe for a few minutes, I did get a little claustrophobic, but then I was just like, you know what? I'm breathing. I'm okay. And so we get out of it. Also did a body cast. That was interesting. So being in that special effects area wasn't unfamiliar to myself. Obviously, the makeup was different because they were applying it piece by piece. And so 2.5 hours later, I'm this alien. I'm this Ravager for Guardians of the Galaxy. And then again, buying into the moment of what I'm doing. We're Ravagers. We're boarding a spaceship. We're trying to get Chris Pratt's role and Dave Bautista. We're trying to get them. Or the other scene where I don't know what's about to happen to me, which, by the way, that was a bonus scene from James Gunn where I get zapped by Adam Warlock. Yeah, I didn't know that was going to happen. We were walking up to set. He goes, "Hey, by the way, I'm gonna kill you again." Because they did that to me in the Suicide Squad where I get blasted. And so he goes, "This time you're getting zapped." And so I was like, "Oh, thanks. You like to do that to me a lot, don't you?" So obviously we get there and he's like, I'm in a chair. You got, Elizabeth Debicki, you got Adam Warlock over there. You've got Jennifer Holland, his wife, and then you've got Nathan Fillion over there. And so I'm like, what's the situation? What's the scene here? What's the situation? He goes, well, it's kind of funny. There's always a lot of humor in Guardians of the Galaxy. And so he's going to turn around and he's going to zap you and then you got to take the laser. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And then, you die. You're smoked to Chris. And then they brought in the dummy, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's how I'm gonna look afterwards. And I'm like, that was pretty cool. So that was fun, man. That was just having fun, being a kid. I was like literally being a kid on set and play. It's make believe. And when you can be like that suspend reality and just be like, today you're gonna die by zap. It's like cool, let's do it.
That's awesome. And that's the one thing. I mean, I've only been on a couple of sets. My uncle shot a film with us, all the cousins, a long time ago. He had a lot of professional equipment. We shot a film, and that was great, but a lot of pressure because you either laugh like me, you laugh, you can't see the line. I made a comedy mockumentary last year. It was really fun, and it's great to be something that you're not. It's fun to do that. I don't know why, but I enjoy it. I don't know if I'll ever do it professionally, but it's just so much fun, and it clearly sounds like you enjoy what you do. Kind of wrapping up, I'm curious about tapes. You, I believe, have experience helping people shoot their tapes and their self tapes, so you kind of know the way of the land. And I know you've landed a lot of your roles through doing self tapes. What's your kind of philosophy? What's your kind of outline and your structure when it comes to how you do your self tapes? And have they been successful? Have you had to adapt? I'm really curious.
Early on, I'm going to say 13 to 15 years ago when tapes were sort of allowed. casting would rarely accept the tape. They wanted you in the room. And hey, that makes sense. I get it. You want to see the actor, you want to get to know them, you want to feel them out, feel their essence. And it just, that was their process. But we were learning to do self-tapes because every once in a while you get lucky and you'd be like, hey, casting said you don't have to fly to New York or LA. Just record it at home or recording a studio and send it, but it's got to be professional. So this was when we were still doing tapes on a little tape, an actual little tape. That's why it's called self-tape, because it was an actual tape. You put it in a camera, record it. Then you used to have to download it to a computer, render it, and then make a digital file out of it. That was taking hours just for one tape. And so obviously I learned from working with a casting director who was already in digital mode, fast forward. And she was like, you need to get yourself a Mac and a digital camera. So that 3-hour tape became 10 minutes. And so I was able to do that. Now, being in acting class, I was merging the acting training that I was getting with the taping. So it was like, all right, listen, let's work the scene out first. Then while I'm reading with you, I'm watching your eye lines, because that's important, because a director's going to see that, or a casting director. And then if you're looking too far off, they're like, why is he talking to the actor who's in the top of the building? Why are you way over there? Like, no, the actor's right there. So being mindful of eye lines and framing. And so as a self-tape coach and actor, I could read with somebody while watch them, right? And watch their eye lines and making sure, and then we play it back, obviously, and say, okay, and I bring them over and be like, all right, watch yourself. Do you believe yourself as this character? Do you see police officer here? Or do you see crackhead? Or do you see villain? Or do you believe what you're saying? Can you take yourself out of your own body and say, wow, that person was scary, or that person delivered that line? Don't look at you, look at the character on the screen, just as you would any character that you're studying in film or TV, right? When you watch you say, man, I really believe that actor. Like, I didn't think that was Nathan. I didn't think that was Chris Pratt. I thought that was, or that was Adam, that was Adam Warlock. Like, they were really in character. Do that to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that? And so I've worked with so many actors, young and old. I've seen so many go on to become stars. And so preparation was obviously the number one thing that mattered in all the self-tapes. Was obviously, if you're sitting there, if the lines are a crutch, if you're just you got your script in your hand and you just can't, there's no believability there, because you're coming out of the scene. What's my line? Back into the scene. What's my line? Now, I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. They get it. Sometimes you can't memorize 10 pages in an hour, and send it in 2 hours. It's nearly impossible to obviously metabolize that character. So working with people. Now, another thing I tell actors with self-tapes in the process is like, listen, my Cobra Kai experience. All right. A lot of actors are saying, hey, I got to be in the room, man. I need direction from a casting director. I'm like, really? So when I booked Cobra Kai, I didn't get the role I was auditioning for, and I had to perform to an empty room. That's what you do in a self-tape. You're performing to an empty room. You might not have a reader. It might just be you saying your lines, because there are no other lines being directed back at you, reacting to you. So that's the same thing. So I had it in a real life pressure situation in an actual set. So go back to my living room where I take my auditions. There's no pressure. I am the pressure. My pressure is to deliver the best performance so that I can repeat that same exact performance. If I get booked, that's exactly what I'm going to do on set until the director says, let's try it a different way. I like what you did on the tape. Give me that first. Now let's try it a different way. Now let's tweak something. Now let's have some fun. You know what? Last take, it's yours. It's your screw it take. Screw it. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I just want to see you have fun, because I already got it in the tank. I've got it. I've got multiple takes that I may use. Where if you give me something different, something new, great. Not only that, you know what? I like working with you. Let's just have fun now. Or I got it. Go home. So yeah, self-tape. I embrace self-tape. I've embraced it for over a decade. I think it's the best thing. You don't have to drive anywhere. Try to unwind when you get there. Oh my gosh, okay, let me get my head straight now. All right, now I got to go into my audition with pressure, and please, you don't want to have that look of desperation in your eyes. I don't have to do all that anymore. Would I still do live? Yeah, I went to a live audition last year for a commercial. It was fine. It was like, hey, what's up, everybody? I'm back. But yeah, self-tape, I'll take it any day of the week.
Wow. and you adapt to these situations. I really appreciate what you said there. When someone says, "Hey, try this," sometimes it's important to follow along and listen. And I guess I've struggled with that quite a bit. Maybe I want to say something like, "I don't really think that's a good idea. I don't really like that." But sometimes when you're given instructions, it's important to follow along and listen. And even if people can be mean, or maybe if they're great and kind, it's always good to follow along. And even if it's a hard situation, much like we talked about with the teleprompter and doing it in Spanish, it's you learned and you grew from that. I'm really curious, kind of wrapping up, but with all your experiences, can you share, of course, from what you're allowed to share, any cool things that we can expect in the future? I do believe you've talked before about doing some directing. What can we expect from your work, and what are you excited about the most?
So currently, I worked on a proof of concept. It's for a film called well, it could be series or film, but we did a short. We're going to call it a short film. It's called Clean Queens.
Okay.
Shot this in Los Angeles last year, and it just got accepted to the Pasadena International Film Festival. So that'll be its world premiere. Obviously, they're trying to get investors or any kind of help to make it into a feature film or potentially a series, whatever comes out of it. I think it's a great idea. That's kind of in the works right now. As far as directing, so one of the things that was in the news here in the last year or several years was John Leguizamo has been very vocal about how there aren't any military movies with Latino war heroes, even though Latinos have fought in every single war that America's ever been in, going all the way back to its inception. And so that's true. I'm a huge military movie buff. And there are some movies with some Latinos in them, but none of them ever start a story about a Latino war hero. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I would love to direct one or get the process going to get one made, even if it's not me. But I think that would be a great directorial debut. I think we have lots of stories there, hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands. I mean, how many people fought in wars, right? And so I've already come across many stories that I'd like to tell or get someone to tell them. I've never directed a short or a feature because I've always been in front of the camera. I consider myself an actor first, but once again, I've been a script supervisor. I've coached and taped actors for well over a decade, and worked with actors for 20 years. So yeah, I think I've got a little experience in the movie making and world. So I think why not? Who knows? Maybe this might be my second calling. And it's not to say I'm ever going to give up acting. I love acting. I love getting into character and being part of that process. And I could always put myself, look at Jon Favreau, right? He started off as an actor, then would do Iron Man and all these big movies, and he would insert himself in those here and there. You can still act, but hey, directing turned out to be his forte. Who knows if that's going to be my second calling, and I'm open to it. So that's what's going on right now, and just we'll see. I mean, we're looking for work as an actor and obviously auditioning just like everyone else. And there's a lot of stuff happening. Texas looks like is going to approve a huge Texas film incentive package to bring a lot of work back to Texas. So I'm looking to be busy here for at least a good decade.